Alright, hey there Pirate Monkey crew, and welcome to another video tutorial. Today we are going to be working on this lovely magenta cape from Vision that we've been working on, and yeah, I'm super excited, so let's jump on in. Okay, so just a preface here, I've went ahead and sped the video up just a little bit. I just feel like the tutorials are getting a little bit slow, and so I wanted to pick things up. But anyway, really all I've done here is a very similar process to what we've been doing for almost all of these Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures, where we have been zenithal priming and then applying a cooler color. In this case, it was just magenta, just because to get cooler than magenta, it would have to be purple, and I don't want the cape to be purple. And so I've just zenithal primed over it again, and we have just gone ahead and glazed over additional layers of purple. And really what this does is it does create kind of like an artificial depth, and it creates really nice contrast on the cape. But we're going to do a few more things to really increase the contrast here. We're not just going to leave it as is. We never really want to do that, right? Even especially if we're going for like a high tabletop, we always want to come back and make sure that we are just kind of giving it that extra little umph of effort. We're not quite going to like competition level, but you know, spending an extra 15 minutes on something, never going to hurt, right? What we are going to do here is we are going to build in some additional shadows, and we initially are going to use a little bit more of a thick magenta for that. It's just a little bit less thinned out, and we're just going to hit those areas where we think the shadows are going to fall a little bit more, and of course just always touching up areas where we might have missed something. Now what I'm doing here is I took a little bit of phthalo blue and mixed it in with my magenta, and we're just deepening those shadows even further where we think that we need to. Also, if you're enjoying the improved audio quality, I am actually recording in my closet, because right now the studio has a lot going on in it. It's got a lot of fans and a lot of air conditioning, and it's great for general work, but not so great for recording, so I thought I would try something new. I felt like the audio has been feeling a little bit tinny, so let me know what you think. So yeah, just kind of briefly getting in some shadows where I feel like they would fall. Not all of them ended up being accurate. That's okay though. A little bit of white, or a little bit of white mixed with magenta, will just help us clean that up where we feel like we need to. And that's essentially what this is going to kind of turn into. Is we're going to do a little bit more sketching on this just to really increase the contrast, like the value contrast, just because it felt like it was missing something. It just felt like it was a little bit flat, and so that's why I'm coming back in with the shadows, and then also here in a minute with some highlights. I'm really picking that one kind of left side to place the shadows on. That's just kind of artificially where I'm having the light fall from, just to create some kind of pattern, and at least in terms of my shadows. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate, but we just need there to be some kind of logic to our highlights and shadows scheme. With the back of his cowl there, I don't know what you want to call it, we're essentially just treating it as a large cylinder, putting the shadows on the corners, because generally if you're viewing the back, you're going to be viewing the back fairly straight on, and so I thought it would make the most sense just to put the highlight somewhat centrally and the shadows off to the side. And of course, none of the shadows or the lower value parts here are necessarily 100% in shadow. That doesn't, shadows aren't always shadows. Sometimes areas feel darker because the highlights are reflecting off of the shape and not necessarily reflecting off of the other parts, and that's why they feel darker. So sometimes calling them shadows isn't actually 100% accurate. It's more that some areas are highlighted and some areas aren't, if that makes sense. I know it's kind of a tricky concept. I know it's a little bit more of an advanced concept to throw in here, but it's just something to think about. Also, let me know if you'd like me to do a more intermediate color theory video series. I feel like that's been on the way, so just want to gauge the interest. So yeah, adding in some highlights here. Of course, this is just white with magenta, just like we were talking about a couple minutes ago, and just very quickly hitting the face. I'm not gonna get too detailed here until just a little bit later, but yeah, it just needed that kind of perking up. Okay, so now we have stepped up the white in that magenta and white mix, and we're just creating our next layer of highlights. Now, I'm being a touch aggressive with it. I'm not being like super aggressive with it, just enough so that we really can feel that there is a difference between the previous highlight and this one. And when you're going for like a high tabletop standard or even tabletop standard, those jumps can be much more extreme, especially if you're working with a brush. If you're working with an airbrush on a bunch of Space Marines for a gaming standard, yeah, you can get it a little bit smoother. Or if you're using more of like a dry brushy technique, then you can maybe get it a little smoother. But with these being comic book characters, originally, I felt like it was okay to be a little bit more aggressive with my brush stroke. It just tends to lend itself very well to this style of miniature in some cases, like especially with the metals and just some elements of the miniature. But yeah, hitting the face just a little bit now, starting to be a little bit more careful. Really want to make sure that I'm hitting the areas that'll face the light, his brow, his cheeks, his nose, his chin, trying to kind of artificially create anatomy by painting the little highlight that is underneath the cheek area around the mouth. And yeah, just trying to be a touch more careful here. If the video is just a touch too fast for you guys you can always slow it down just by using YouTube's system. If you hit the little gear, there's a little option for playback speed. You should be able to dial it down slower if there's an area that you're wanting to watch in a little bit more detail, just so that you guys have that point of reference. I don't want you guys feeling like it's unfair, and the same thing goes for if it's not fast enough for you, you can always speed it up. I'm pretty sure we're another step up here. A little bit more white added into that mix. We're just really trying to hit those upper highlight areas. Just really carefully trying to draw in those lighter highlights. It's always so interesting as well to watch the paint being applied relative to where it's already been applied. Acrylic paint, when it has white mixed into it, tends to always want to dry just a touch darker than when it was applied. It always feels lighter when it's wet, and it'll kind of shift. And it's mainly when there's white included. A lot of people complain about miniature paints always feeling lighter when they're wet than when they're dark. And it's because most miniature paints have so much white mixed into them. It's kind of one of the untold things about miniatures paints. And I mean, that's the other benefit too of pure pigments, is that they tend to dry a little bit more similarly, you know, relative to if they're wet or if they are dry. They tend to be the same color, unless there's white mixed in, right? Then you gotta start to shift that interpretation. Just going over everything here with a really quick glaze of thinned down pure pigment magenta, just to even everything out, smooth everything out. Glazing, of course, is just one of the best smoothing techniques around. It's great. It adds color depth. Glazing is just one of those. It's so similar to washing too. If you're nervous to glaze, just start off by washing the entire area, and then just make sure that you're not getting any puddling or pooling. Just soak all of that up. But yeah, it's really just to blend transitionary areas. The same thing kind of goes for glazes, as I was talking about previously. It's much harder to glaze a paint if it has white mixed in. Then you're kind of going to be fighting a little bit more of a uphill battle, just because the glaze has a pure opaque pigment in it, and when it has an opaque pigment, it's opaque, right? It's not see-through in it, so it can kind of mess with the way that you're glazing. Whites don't really glaze super well. A lot of people, when they complain of, everything's really chalky, it's because you're glazing with a white. You can glaze with a white, but you just have to really finesse it. You have to really practice and practice over and over again. So just putting a couple of final details here on the Infinity Stone. I think it's the Thought Stone there on Vision's noggin. I'm using a different yellow than I use for the rest of the model. I'm using a Hansa yellow, just pure Hansa yellow over white, and then a little dot of pure white just to indicate the reflection. And that is where this video wraps up. I hope you guys join me for the last video of this mini Vision series, where we are going to hit non-metallic metal. That's going to be a ton of fun. Just showing you how I approach NMM in a little bit more of an aggressive way. And we will see you then. Thank you so much for your support and your patience. I know I don't always get these videos out when I would like to, but I'm trying, guys. That's why I'm putting out 2 in kind of rapid succession for you guys, and then I'm going to try to have 1 more at the end of the month. So hope you guys are staying safe. Hope you guys are staying well during the COVID apocalypse, and yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you again for your support. Bye.